They asked me to label the gluten-free cookies and take out the trash at a party held inside my mansion. And the best part? None of them knew I owned it. Not my brother who made the speech, not his fiancé who called me hands-on, not even my parents. Hi, I'm Jenna, and for most of my life, I was the quiet one, the helper, the girl in the background. But that day, I decided to stop shrinking and let the truth speak for itself. Want to know how a nobody's sister turned the tables at her own family's reunion? Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. The email arrived on a Thursday morning, buried between a marketing report and a coupon for lawn fertilizer. The subject line read, Whitmore Family Reunion, June 17th. I didn't need to open it to know where it would be held. Of course, it was the estate. The grand southern mansion with the white columns and creaking porch swing, where our family had hosted every major event since before I was born. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked. The details were all there: guest list, tentative schedule, suggested dress code. But what caught my attention was Ethan's note at the bottom, written like an afterthought. Jenna, you're great with checklists. Can you help with food service and guest parking? I stared at the line, lips curling into a smile that had nothing to do with amusement. It reminded me of his engagement party 5 years ago. He'd given me a clipboard and asked me to keep the buffet line flowing, then told everyone I preferred being behind the scenes. Back then, I swallowed my pride. This time, I read the message again, then forwarded it to Naomi with no comment. Within a minute, she called. He's got some nerve, she said, half laughing. Want me to accidentally reply all with your net worth? I chuckled. Tempting, but no, let them talk. We've got more important things to build. Naomi had been with me since the beginning, back when Magnolia Group was just a dream on a vision board and I was working out of my apartment. Together, we had closed on the Whitmore estate 6 months ago through a shell company. It was a silent acquisition, my quiet rebellion. No press, no ribbon cutting, just paperwork, a wire transfer, and a key. Now the place was technically mine. The irony didn't escape me. I'll go, I said finally, leaning back in my chair. I'll pour the sweet tea and label the peach cobbler. I'll wear whatever apron they hand me. There was a pause on the line. You sure? I'm sure. That night, I pulled out the leather portfolio with the estate's purchase documents. The deed bore my name, tucked neatly beneath the company's seal. As I ran my fingers along the embossed edges, I thought about all the times I'd been told to stay quiet, be helpful, not make a scene. I wasn't planning on making one now, either. Some things don't need a spotlight to shine. By Friday afternoon, Naomi had confirmed the permits, catering orders, and staffing. Everything was in place. You're the only Whitmore who owns real estate in their name, she said lightly as we reviewed the final checklists. And the only one with their name on a property worth 7 figures. I smiled but said nothing. There's a kind of peace in knowing exactly who you are without needing everyone else to say it. When Saturday came, I took the long route to the estate, windows down, letting the humid breeze of early summer roll in. As I turned onto the familiar gravel drive, the columns rose in front of me, just as they always had. But this time, something had shifted. I wasn't the same girl who once sliced cake in the kitchen and waited to be seen. I slowed the car as I spotted Ethan in the distance, gesturing wildly at a group of staff members. My guess, he was reassigning someone's parking spot. Let's see if he assigns me a name tag, too. Jenna, Madison called out from across the dining room, waving a linen napkin like it was a distress flag. This cream is too yellow. Do you think we can afford better? I glanced up from the seating chart I wasn't even supposed to be reviewing. Madison was standing by the long banquet table, one hand on her hip, the other holding the napkin between 2 perfectly manicured fingers, as if afraid it might stain her. The same fingers, I remembered, that once handed me a knockoff clutch for Christmas with the line, "It's almost like the real one." I walked over slowly, offered a polite smile, and said, "That's the cream shade the planner ordered per your file, but I'm happy to check if there's a softer ivory available." Madison blinked, thrown off by my calm tone. "Well, I suppose it'll have to do," she muttered, setting the napkin down like it had personally offended her. Inside the estate, preparations were in full swing. Staff bustled through the main hall with trays, adjusting glassware and placing fresh-cut hydrangeas in tall silver vases. The scent of fried green tomatoes drifted from the open kitchen, mingling with the breeze that floated in through French doors. Ethan found me near the back patio. "Hey, could you grab a few more folding chairs from the storage shed? The cousins from Savannah brought extras." His tone made it sound like I worked here. I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. "Sure." As I made my way outside, I passed a group of early guests. One of them smiled at me and asked where the restroom was, assuming I was on staff. I directed her without correcting the assumption. It wasn't worth the trouble. Besides, I'd chosen this role. For now. Naomi found me near the iced sweet tea station. She was holding a clipboard and pretending to check something, but her eyes met mine, with that familiar glint. "Permits are all set," she said softly. "Your name's on everything. No one's questioned a thing." "Good," I replied, taking a sip of tea from a mason jar. It was cool, sharp with lemon, and not too sweet, just the way I liked it. A few moments later, I slipped into the kitchen and found Marcus, the head chef. Years ago, I'd mentored him during his first catering gig. Now he ran his own crew and was plating mini crab cakes like a maestro. "To old dreams," I said, raising a glass of lemonade. He lifted his ladle like a salute. "And new owners with good taste." We shared a quiet laugh before I slipped back out to the hallway. Ralph, the estate manager, caught me by the staircase, away from the noise. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "All's running smooth. You ready for tomorrow?" I nodded, smiling at the oil painting above us. A Whitmore ancestor scowling in his frame like he disapproved of modern furniture. "Let's see how ready they are," I said. As the sun began to set, Ethan stood on the front porch chatting with a guest in a seersucker jacket. I walked past them just in time to hear Ethan say, "She's in real estate or something? Rentals, I think." I didn't flinch. Some truths didn't need correcting. They'd be clear soon enough. "Big shout out to Jenna," Ethan said, raising his glass halfway through the welcome dinner, "for setting up the trash bins and labeling the gluten-free cookies. Logistics queen, as always." A few chuckles scattered across the patio. I smiled and lifted my glass in return, saying nothing. This wasn't the first time he'd thanked me publicly in the most condescending way possible. At my high school graduation, he'd joked into the microphone, "Thanks to Jenna for keeping the soda cold and the snacks organized." It was his specialty, praising while diminishing. The back patio of the estate glowed under strands of bistro lights. Linen-covered tables surrounded the space, and guests milled about with pulled pork sliders on monogrammed plates. A jazz trio near the garden played a slow rendition of Ray Charles. It was a warm, golden evening, full of clinking glasses and shallow compliments. I walked to the drink station to check the iced tea and lemonade levels, making sure the dispensers weren't empty. Naomi appeared beside me, casually swirling her drink. "That toast," she murmured, "should have come with a warning label." "Let him have his fun," I replied, adjusting the lid on the tea jar. "Tomorrow we'll give them something better to talk about." Madison approached next, dressed in a shimmering floral dress that likely cost more than my entire college tuition. "Next time," she said sweetly, "maybe delegate some of this." "You're so hands-on, it's cute, like a lifestyle blogger in real life." I turned to her, keeping my expression light. "Well, someone has to make sure the napkins are the right shade of cream." Her smile twitched. "Touché." As she drifted off, Ralph appeared with a folder in hand. He held it out to me discreetly. "Tomorrow's paperwork. We'll need the owner's signature on these insurance forms before guests arrive." I took the folder without opening it. "I'll sign them in front of the whole committee." He blinked. "You're sure?" I nodded. "Let's make it official." Naomi, who had been hovering close, leaned in with a grin. We should print extra copies, just in case someone gets flustered and tears one in protest. A little later, my cousin Adam, who had brought his camera, just for fun, asked if he could snap some candid shots. I agreed, as long as he avoided close-ups of the food stains on my blouse. He caught one photo of me at the far end of the patio, quietly flipping through the forms Ralph had handed me. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. The night wore on. Laughter rose, plates emptied, and the jazz band switched to a soft instrumental of Georgia on My Mind. I slipped away from the tables to refill my drink, enjoying the slight hush as the evening began to wind down. That's when I heard Ethan again, standing with a small group of aunts and uncles. He was sipping whiskey and chuckling. "Just imagine if she actually owned this place," he said. "Wouldn't that be something?" My hand paused on the ladle. I didn't turn around. Instead, I let the ice clink into my glass and smiled quietly to myself. Let them imagine. Tomorrow they wouldn't have to. The ballroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and fresh peonies. The chandeliers glimmered in the midday light, casting soft halos onto the linen-covered tables. Around me, relatives sipped sweet tea, laughed too loudly, and leaned in close over shrimp and grits in cocktail cups. I stood near the back wall beneath a portrait of my grandfather, hands folded loosely in front of me. I wore the simple white sundress Naomi had suggested. It didn't shout anything. It simply belonged, like I did. "Ms. Whitmore," Ralph's voice rang out, clear and deliberate, as he stepped forward holding a clipboard. "We'll need your signature on the insurance forms, as the owner of the estate." The room went quiet so fast you could almost hear the ice melting in someone's glass. Heads turned, forks hovered mid-air. I felt more than a dozen pairs of eyes land on me at once. Ethan blinked. "What did you just say?" Ralph, unbothered, repeated himself. "We need the owner's signature, Miss Jenna Whitmore." I stepped forward slowly, heels soft against the polished floor. I took the clipboard from Ralph and signed without rushing, each stroke of my pen deliberate. Then I handed it back and turned to face my brother. "You?" Ethan laughed once, sharp, confused. "You can't own this place." "Magnolia Group closed on it 6 months ago," I replied. "I'm its sole partner." A cousin at the drinks table dropped his plastic cup. Somewhere behind me, Madison muttered something under her breath. Her smile, that fixed showroom grin, had faded. Ethan shook his head, gesturing to the high ceilings and antique columns. "This is the family estate." "No," I said gently. "It was. Now it's one of 17 venues managed under my company. This one just happens to have our name on the mailbox." "Is this a joke?" he hissed. Naomi stood quietly in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the whole scene unfold like a play she'd already memorized. "It's a coincidence, right?" Ethan looked around the room, searching for backup. "She didn't plan this." I met his gaze. "I didn't plan the reunion. You chose the venue. You handed me the clipboard." He looked ready to say something else, but nothing came. I turned toward the crowd and lifted my chin slightly. "If you'd like the reunion to continue, I suggest we follow the estate's policies. No exceptions, even for family." It wasn't a threat. It was protocol. A murmur rippled through the guests. Some turned back to their tables, unsure where to look. A few glanced at Madison, who was still frozen beside the drinks cart. Her hand rested on a glass of Prosecco she hadn't yet sipped. My father remained seated, his fingers folded tightly around a cloth napkin. He didn't speak. My mother, however, rose slowly and walked toward me. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she stopped just close enough that no one else could hear her. "You should have told us," she whispered. I looked at her for a moment. "You never asked." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't respond. Behind me, Ralph cleared his throat, as if to move the day forward. I nodded to him and returned to my place near the wall. Naomi raised her eyebrows from across the room. I gave her the faintest smile. Power doesn't always need to announce itself. Sometimes it's just a matter of walking into a room and letting others catch up. The back garden had changed with the light. By evening, it shimmered under strands of warm string bulbs, casting soft halos over the linen tablecloths and swaying shadows onto the trimmed hedges. A breeze moved through the oak trees like a sigh, stirring the lanterns and chasing away the heat of the day. I stood near the dessert table, watching bourbon swirl in crystal glasses as laughter rose in small, uneven bursts. No one was talking over each other anymore, not since the reveal. "You always did have good instincts," Dad said, appearing beside me and offering a cocktail napkin like it was a peace treaty. "I guess we underestimated you." I took the napkin and nodded politely. At my college graduation, he'd said, "We're proud you finished, even if it's not finance." That had stuck with me for years. Now, here he was, not gushing, but reaching. I appreciated the attempt. Aunt Claire stopped me near the buffet line. "I didn't know you were the one behind Magnolia. My daughter's wedding was at one of your venues in Raleigh. It was beautiful." "Thank you," I said. "We just opened a second one in Asheville." Suddenly, people wanted to hear about floor plans, zoning permits, and investment timelines, not because they cared about real estate, but because they now realized I mattered. It was funny how quickly attention shifted once your name appeared on a deed. Madison stayed on the edge of the crowd, her expression unreadable. She made no move to speak, just circled quietly, scanning. Naomi, meanwhile, had become a star in her own right. I watched as Ralph introduced her to a pair of older guests from the country club, calling her Director of Operations for Magnolia Group. Her posture had changed, shoulders back, voice steady. I caught her eye and raised my glass. She returned the gesture, a flicker of something joyful passing between us. Mom found me near the trellis where the band was setting up for a second round. "You always liked buildings," she said, a bit out of nowhere. "You used to draw floor plans on the backs of placemats." "I remember," I said. "You told me not to waste napkins." She gave a soft laugh. "We should have asked more questions." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't cruel, just careful. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "you don't realize someone's growing until they're too big to ignore." Her smile faded into something more thoughtful. She touched my arm briefly, then drifted back into the crowd. The conversations kept shifting toward Naomi and me. For once, Ethan didn't have the spotlight, and he knew it. He stood near the bar, hands in his pockets, saying little. Every now and then, he looked toward me but said nothing. I let the silence between us settle. Madison, on the other hand, eventually approached. Her heels clicked across the flagstone like a metronome. She didn't smile. "So this was your revenge," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "This was me choosing not to shrink anymore." We stared at each other for a moment. Then she walked away. A guest leaned over from the next table, lowering her voice like we were in on a secret. "If you ever open another estate, let us know. We'd book it in a heartbeat." I glanced at Naomi, who was already tapping something into her phone. She caught my look and gave the faintest shrug. "Savannah," she mouthed. I took a sip of my drink. The night was cooling, but something in me had started to warm. The letter sat atop the Post and Courier, perfectly centered on my desk like Naomi had placed it there with intention. The paper was thick, matte gray, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Underneath it, my face smiled back from the business section, framed by the headline, "Southern Hospitality Redefined, the Woman Behind Magnolia Group." Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. Outside, Charleston buzzed with its usual rhythm. Car horns, cafe chatter, the distant clatter of construction. Inside, it was quiet. Naomi was at her desk, scrolling through schedules, one earbud in, humming faintly to a classical piece I didn't recognize. I turned the envelope over once before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery folded neatly. "I should have asked what you were building instead of assuming you were failing. I was wrong." Ethan clipped to the note was a copy of the newspaper article. I held it between my fingers for a moment, then stood and walked to the corkboard near the window. I pinned the article just below a photo of me from the reunion, wearing the apron, holding a tray, smiling like I didn't have a secret worth millions in my back pocket. Naomi looked up. "Savannah Estates under contract," she said. "We close by Friday." I nodded. "Any early interest?" "A few. One's from a company called Blake Creative. Ring a bell?" I raised an eyebrow. "Madison Blake?" Naomi flipped her tablet around to show me the request. We'd like to schedule a tour for an upcoming fundraiser, hoping to work with Magnolia. I let out a breath. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh, just something in between. Then I reached for my planner. "Let's see if we're available," I said. Naomi grinned but didn't comment. We didn't need to say much anymore. Some things we just understood. I sat back down and turned my attention to the rest of the week. The to-do list was long. New properties, vendor contracts, hiring rounds. But there was peace in the rhythm now, a quiet kind of triumph that didn't require applause. My phone buzzed once, a text from Mom. I glanced at it, saw the preview. "Thinking of you. Call when you have time," and set it aside. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Naomi turned up the music slightly and the office filled with soft cello notes. I leaned back, letting the sound settle in. There was still so much to do, so many places left to build. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. Success doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it just needs a porch light and your name on the deed. Looking at that letter from Ethan, I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet kind of peace. The kind that settles in when you stop needing approval and start living your truth. Sometimes, the people closest to us are the last to see what we've built, not out of cruelty but out of habit. But when we choose to stop shrinking, to stand steady in who we are, we give them and ourselves a chance to see things differently. If this story reminded you of a moment when you had to step into your own light, I'd love to hear it. Let's keep sharing these quiet victories, because they're the ones that change everything.